Welcome to the Dire Gentleman channel. My name is Gus Zagarella.
And my name is Henry Galley, and welcome to Two Professional Writers, the show where me and Gus, a pair of writers who get paid for it, critique advice on writing and life.
Heck yeah.
Today, we're doing our first Two Professional Writers sequel. It's not just because we've run out of ideas, that just happens to be an incidental fact of the matter.
And we have another sequel planned along with it. So we're in that Pixar era when they released Cars 2 and then Toy Story 3, you know?
Everyone's favorite Cars 2.
Yeah.
Today, well, we know people are excited for the second part on Creepypasta Writing Advice, and that is on its way, but we did a video on Tumblr Writing Advice a while back, and the advice was excellent. Like, really good stuff, really great conversation, really interesting video. Gus and I are, despite people who haven't really used the website in a while, we're both ardent defenders of it and its community as a whole. And recently we found out, due to changes in Apple's terms of service, Tumblr, the actual, website and the people who run it, have gone even more deranged in their desire to, alienate their own fan base by blocking a bunch of tags, including just the word girl.
Which is absolute insanity, because if you block the word girl, all you're left with is monsters. You're left with monster girl with no girl, and that's all monster, and that's chaos.
That's Kenku chaos.
That's Kenku chaos.
In all likelihood, the people at Tumblr are hurting right now. They are begging for, the good old days, and we're here to give them a piece of that nostalgia while also seeing if we can find some more great writing advice, or just strange and interesting and funny writing advice from the people of that singularly unique website. Are you ready to go, Gus?
Absolutely. The last time we did this was super varied, and all of our best advice seems to come from, a lot of different people coming together towards a concerted goal of making everybody better at whatever specific fixation they have with writing. And I think that's a lot better than the iconoclasts.
Exactly. Communities will generally just source better information together than individuals who are, thinking too much about, their own personal sense of ego.
Apes stronger together, unless they're a bunch of NFTs.
Yeah, God, fucking FTs. First, we have an interesting, slightly longer tip from Coffee Bean Writing. And as is standard protocol when we have longer tips, I'm going to sort of read it in chunks and we'll discuss it piece by piece.
Nice.
Story questions and how they make your scenes better. After reading Paul Meunier's book Plot Perfect, I discovered story questions. Everything suddenly clicked. Write a story that plants questions into the reader's mind. Questions that are important enough to keep the audience interested until you choose to answer them. Answer the questions that need to be answered in order for the story to make sense, but postpone the ones that can wait for added suspense and tension. Your readers will never want to put the book down if you do this successfully. What is a story question? There are 3 types. Do you have any thoughts so far?
No, I think that this is a very good way of doing it. I mean, honestly, a show that I watched recently, it's pretty popular, pretty critically acclaimed now, so a lot of people will know what I'm talking about. But Ted Lasso, the comedy drama with Jason Sudeikis in it, there was a thing that I kind of noticed throughout watching the whole show is that you'll get questions raised about each of the characters, and then little by little, they'll give you the payoff for each of those things while introducing further intrigue. And while it was just very funny on its own, it was interesting that they never really committed to giving any piece of information until the show had earned telling you it.
Yeah, I've never seen Ted Lasso myself, but I think as a general rule, I am really agreed with, it can be helpful to conceptualize things as, seeding questions, because that is a great way to get people invested, and it's not even necessarily a sense of mystery. It can just be, okay, a character acts a certain way. Why? What about, their past would cause them to be like this? But I think a really important caveat I'm going to throw in, which is pretty important: don't plant questions you don't know the answers to, because that's how you get, a Lost type situation.
Or BBC Sherlock, which
Yeah.
some people are still out there thinking there are going to be hidden episodes that answer all of the questions that were set up, which don't have answers. They simply don't. The show has even blatantly been don't worry about this. You're crazy for thinking that this matters.
Yeah, honestly, and I'm sure this is something that a lot of our Tumblr audience will really relate to, because that was the epicenter of all of the crazy John Locke stuff. But In particular, I am always positively haunted by the immense cruelty of Stephen Moffat and Mark Gatiss in that like hiatus between, it was either season 1 and season 2 or season 2 and season 3, can't remember, sorry. But when Sherlock fakes his death and they kept telling people, "Oh, keep theorizing, all will be revealed," and then they never gave an answer.
Exactly. I think that when it comes to story questions, it's important to have that foundation, those answers before you go into the story, because then all it is getting those questions in the right order.
Yeah,
And then you've
exactly.
got it. I feel like I just quoted the Garth Marenghi's place.
It's all about questions, but get them in the right order. That's the trick.
That's the trick.
Next, all right. So we'll go to the first of the questions here. Number one, the leading question, and then in parenthesis, primary question. The main question that the reader is asking that will be answered at the end of the story. It drives the plot. In a romance novel, it might be, will she find her soulmate? Or in a war novel, it might be, will they complete their mission and at what cost? Examples: will Dorothy find her way back home and how? Will Romeo and Juliet end up together? Will Frodo destroy the ring and at what costs? Does Elena Gilbert end up with Stefan or Damon Salvatore? I heard Meg laugh in the background. Um, leading questions aren't answered until the end, so you need to weave a big/small story question throughout the narrative to keep the audience hooked. I wholeheartedly agree with that, and also just absolutely love that Coffee Bean Writing was conscientious enough to provide multiple examples of this in practice in popular media to help people internalize it.
Yeah, exactly. And I also think to go off of this, because I love everything I saw here, another way to think of like stories or questions, you can have like a bigger practical thing that the character is trying to do, like the bigger goal, which could be bringing peace to the world. And then there's the smaller steps along the way, like mastering the four elements, visiting the four nations, that sort of thing. Oh, Centaur World, which I'm a big fan of. The first season has the 5 key pieces to open the portal between worlds. All the while, the bigger goal of character development is occurring. So it's good to have like sort of multiple tracks for the audience to experience the progress or to be paced through the information or intentions of the story.
I completely agree, and I think that leads quite nicely onto the second part of Coffee Bean Ratings list here. Number two, the big story questions, then in parenthesis, big scenes and subplots. The questions and answers that arise during the big scenes of your book, and well, of course, they say book here, but we can expand it to just any type of storytelling. Every subplot should have a big question that readers wonder about. Examples: in Harry Potter, we are curious about the subplot of Snape and if he is evil or good, and what I think that's his backstory is. That's what it's meant to be anyway. Everyone does typos sometimes. His contrasting actions and mystery keeps us intrigued, and we want to find out the answers. Princess Leia is captured and plants an SOS message inside of the droid R2D2. We wonder, will the droid find someone to help rescue her, and who will it be? Later on, we wonder if Luke will join Obi-Wan on his mission or return to his mundane life. Even further into the story, we wonder if Obi-Wan will die or live fighting Vader in an effort to help Luke and his friends. And if he dies, how will it affect Luke? In Hermione and Ron's friendship/romantic subplot, we are always certainly wondering if they will remain friends or become more. Just want to say, before we go any further, me and Gus massively disapprove of all the awful shit that J.K. Rowling says, and we are allies
Oh,
to
yes,
trans people
absolutely.
everywhere, which is just, important
Fuck
anytime that shit
turfs.
comes up. Anyway, that aside,
Exactly.
how do you feel about that, Gus?
Yeah, no, I was just gonna agree. Fuck turfs. Also, just incidentally, fuck Star Wars, but that's more of a me thing, and it has nothing to do with anyone involved with making it. J.K. Rowling shit, unforgivable, and honestly, Harry Potter. I'm glad that it's this thing that people can like use as kind of a paint by numbers way, because the example here does really work. Star Wars, Harry Potter. For me, I brought up Avatar: The Last Airbender. Those are usually the go-to things that people are like, here's how you map bigger structural stuff onto. I don't think anything new was said here, but these were good examples and they're really intuitive to help people understand.
Yep, agreed, agreed. Because at the end of the day, good advice should really be helpful for people at like all levels, but I think it's really important as well to have a mix of advice that can help people who are just sort of dipping their toes in the water, and people who are like intermediate or even experienced, because at the end of the day, the thing about writing and life is that you never stop learning. There is never an end to the journey. Like, for example, when me and Gus say we're professional writers, we're not saying we're the best writers in the world, that we've won Oscars, that we're millionaires, just that we do it for money. We are learning as much as anyone watching this is, and it's all about having an open mind. Because honestly, the advice we receive in these different videos, I learn new things, and I love that because we're all works in progress.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like, I can't imagine feeling engaged with the world and not continuing to learn. Like, it's just such a big part of being alive and doing this craft for me, especially because it gets to be my job. But also, I think one thing needs to be said about examples of like big, like classic pieces of media, like, you know, Harry, your Lord of the Rings, your Avatar, stuff like that. It's a good baseline to get people who are like at anywhere from amateur to mid level, even to professional level, to be on the same, on board with this stuff. And all I want to do is give a light warning against understanding the basics and feeling like you need to mimic these stories are two different things, and you should never feel obligated to mimic any particular structure, just to understand them more.
100%, 100%. The last thing of coffee bean writing is three, the little questions, then in parenthesis, little scene. Smaller, less intestine. Well, what is my mind doing today? Smaller, less
Less
intense question,
intestine.
less intestines. How dare you? I will never include less intestines in my
The
work.
more intestine and the least intestine.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to include more intestines in my next piece just to spite you.
I don't know if I can like ethically tell people to leave a comment with intestines down below.
Well, in that case, I'd say, yeah, me who has less ethical concerns than you, work intestines into your comment. More intestines, damn it. More fucking intestines.
And if you can replace a word, if you can misspell another word as intestines, all the better. No, no
Fascinating.
shade to Coffee Bean, but like
No, no,
it is
literally
just...
no shade, because
Wait,
that was
no, it was
me
you. It was
fucking that
you.
up. They can't be
Yeah, that's
blamed
right.
for
It was
that. I'm
you.
the weirdo with the fucking intestine preoccupation. It's all the vor in my mind. Anyway, smaller, less
You heard
intense
it here first,
questions that
folks.
weave you throughout the smaller scenes of your story. Every page of your book should have little story questions, or even every other paragraph if you plan it accordingly. Leave a question in one paragraph and answer it in the next. Example, the first paragraph of The Hunger Games. When I wake up, the other side of my bed is cold. My fingers stretch out, seeking Prim's warmth and finding only the rough canvas cover of the mattress. She must have had bad dreams and climbed in with our mother. Of course she did. This is the day of the reaping. We were already asking little story questions. Who is Prim? What is the reaping? Why is her bed rough? Is she underprivileged? As we continue to read, these little story questions are gradually answered, giving readers a steady flow of wonder and answer, wonder and answer. It's a delicate balance, however. If you forget to answer a story question or wait too long, it could frustrate your readers. During your scenes, you must anticipate what your readers are wondering slash asking, and then find the right time to answer slash resolve these questions for the best amount of suspense. What do you think?
I think I agree. Like, it's all about threading these things throughout it. To give an example of, I think that, and this is no offense to anyone who is like a fan of this show, a lot of people probably haven't even heard of it. But Henry, have you heard of the sci-fi series Dark Matter?
No, I haven't. What's the gist?
So, Dark Matter begins with an incredibly compelling question of six people waking up on a spaceship and not knowing who they are and having no memories. And you think that that is going to be the overarching, like, dramatic question of the whole series. Who are these people given this fresh start? Who will they be? So it gets entirely resolved at the end of the first season, and the remaining two seasons are new questions continually being introduced. So essentially, entirely new questions of like this same cast of characters who have already had their plots resolved.
I think the problem is there to refer to it with the context we've just been discussing with coffee bean writing. They resolved their leading or primary question way too quickly, which I think is a big problem that another show that I, on the whole, really enjoy, at least this first season, I haven't watched the rest, but it's the big problem that Jessica Jones had with blowing its most compelling resonant villain with Kilgrave at the end of the first season.
Exactly. That's the roughest thing where like you can have an incredible payoff to a storyline, but then you should probably make sure that's your ending. Don't then proceed to do the things that are less interesting. You should probably just start a new show at that point.
Well, yeah, I mean that's what I think Coffee Bean was saying as well. Just put all of those other questions in there before you answer the big one.
Absolutely. Yeah, everything I said is in line with the context set out by Coffee Bean Writing, and I think that honestly they did a really great job with all these tips, story questions.
Completely agreed. Now we're on to a different tip giver. It's Carrie Reed Writing, and this is very colorfully written. The opening sort of title is "Fuck Your First Line and Unfuck Your Writer's Block." Are you ready?
Let's do it.
I don't know if y'all know this about me yet. I fought with imposter syndrome for a good 6 years? Yeah, for 6 years I wrote zilch, nothing, nada. Why? Because I ran into that ever delightful feeling of, you don't write like insert author name here. Why are you trying? Or, look at all these 20 something year olds publishing their first book and winning awards. Do you really think you could do that? God, this feels very real.
Yeah, yeah, I'm tugging at my collar a little bit.
Carrie Reed Writing
Ooh.
going for the fucking jugular. My god. Alright, it continues. And no, I can't do that. I have to be content with never achieving that. But writing is so ingrained in me. I wasn't myself for those 6 years. I wanted myself back. So for the last 2 years, I committed to untriggering my brain to take the pressure off and give myself permission to suck. One of those triggers is having so much of your dreams riding on the first line of your story. Y'all, I hate that. I hate articles that say the first line is the most important thing to write. I hate it when the authors say the first line is the thing that will hook the readers in, and if you don't hook them, they'll never read your book. I hate those things with every single DNA strand in my body. There are so many other things that are deal breakers for readers. POV, active versus passive voice, too much description, too much dialogue, violence, sex, and we're not even going to touch saggy middle syndrome and failing to fulfill your plot promises yet. So fascinating following that other one. What I'm trying to get at is, first line shouldn't be your priority. It shouldn't even be the focus. What you really need to do is concentrate on character development, building a strong story, hitting the appropriate story beats, be aware of your pacing, fulfilling promises. And when you've gotten to the point where you're satisfied with all that and your beta reader just can't get enough, you can now work on that first line hook. If you ever needed permission to fuck your first line so you can concentrate on the important shit, here is your permission. Dear writer, fuck your first line and get back to writing. And remember, you don't suck at writing, no one really does, you just haven't improved your craft. Or, if you are like me, you place too much pressure and one tiny part of your writing. Don't do that to yourself. It's time to be brave, dear writer, and let all that stupid advice go. Have fun, remember what got you into writing, and hold on to that for dear life. Happy writing, y'all. What do you think?
There was a lot of really good stuff in
Yeah.
that. Like from the discussion of like imposter syndrome to the giving yourself permission to suck for a while, which make no mistake, all of us, like even people who have done this for a while, we need to like let go sometimes and just let something be its least perfect self before we can get to a better draft of it.
Yeah, 100%, because you can't do a better draft of a thing that doesn't exist. We've said this a million times. And I think Carrie has done a really good job articulating a frustration a lot of writers have. Feel free to tell me differently in the comments, and feel free to tell me differently, Gus, if the same is for you. But sometimes I will have a thing where I'll have a potential project in mind, and I'll be like, oh god, I'm gonna weigh the odds that I think I could do this right with the amount of time it would take to do it, whether it's good or bad. And it's like, oh, this would be a lot of investment for something that might not even be good. And I'll talk myself out of it, which is a horrible habit. But I'm not gonna lie, is one that I have.
Yeah, no, and I feel the same way. I've done that a lot too, especially on like, well, I told you about a couple projects I had where like, yes, I could do them, but I would need to research an entirely new topic to
Mm,
myself for such a long period of time that I basically wouldn't be able to work on anything else, and thus at the moment it's not worth it, and based on the amount of research might not ever be. Now that seems a little bit pessimistic, but think about how much I'll be getting done that I know I can get done once I start committing to the ideas that are doable for right now.
Can I give a weird piece of very specific advice that kind of builds on Carrie? Because the thing is, I wholeheartedly agree with everything Carrie said. So there's nothing I would dispute there, and nothing I feel the need to rephrase because I think it was expressed in a very straightforward and like audience friendly manner.
It was vulnerable and like relatable. I think you would have to not have ever struggled with writing in order to not get something out of that, and I don't think such a person exists.
Yeah, exactly. But I often make weird allusions to my like main writing day job, which I can't fully talk about just because I have NDAs on it. But the funny thing about my job is it involves doing a great deal of research on a certain like topic, and these topics vary massively. They can be like telling a fictional story or doing a more like kind of educational but in a fun way approach. And what's really funny about that is I can start the day writing about a topic that I have no fucking clue about. And in one day of research, I can write like a 2,000 word script that fully explains that topic to someone who was in my position at the start of that same day. And the reason I think I'm able to do that is because when you do something that is just for money and not for passion, whether it's writing or anything else, you put so much less pressure on yourself. And it kind of makes you realize if you had some like magical like fairy that could make you, not put that same pressure on yourself for your like passion projects that you do for your like money work, you'd be able to write convincingly about any subject. But the second it gets emotional, the second it's personal, the insecurity creeps in. So you could almost do yourself and your projects a big favor by writing them but caring about them less. As odd as that sounds.
No, I think you're actually right. I think you might have even changed my perspective on this very topic by saying that, because you laid it out so convincingly. If you treat it as necessary work and obligation rather than something that you've really invested your like very body and spirit into it being great first time around, then yeah, you get it done because it matters more that the task is complete than whether or not you feel like you've done your most potent statement of artistic passion in it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we had a lot of strangely angry commenters about our suggestions to do some of the heavier research after you've written your first draft. But I stand by that because I'm going to throw a little bit of shade here, not at any one specific type of person. I know people who will say, "Oh yeah, I just need to research this topic for my novel, screenplay, series, whatever," and they're still researching because yeah, you are never gonna know everything about a topic, and you really don't need to know everything about a topic to write about it. Like, I read this thing ages ago that was like, this is a very outdated uh piece of like psychology terminology. It is not reflective of the modern nomenclature, but it is a thing that's like sociopaths tend to have like a very like superficial intelligence because they are able to confidently recite a few remembered details in a wide number of topics that suggests they are way more well versed than they are. But you can take a lesson from that in writing because you don't need to be able to dump loads of information. If you can drop one or two facts convincingly, the reader, unless they themselves are an expert in that field, will be there with you.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's not all about like literal like just pound for pound how much information you can place into the audience's brain with the with enough finesse. It is literally just like, what fits the story. Bits and pieces of information can be conveyed with like a single line in a very subtle way. Well-constructed dialogue is not dialogue that conveys a whole lot necessarily, but taken as a whole within the rest of the show, you can have lines that inform things several hours into the project that you go like, oh, this is further enriched for having that line there.
Yeah, absolutely. At the end of the day, you're not writing an encyclopedia unless you are, in which case, awesome. Okay, ready for the next one?
Yeah, absolutely. It's pretty good so far.
Yeah, great work, Carrie. We're now on to writing one's dreams. And this is a nice short one, too. Never throw out your old writing. I read these fanfics I wrote ages ago and totally forgot about and thought they were just wasted effort anyway. And they were so cool, so self indulgent, perfectly scratched the itch I had. I was delighted how long they were and disappointed when they ended already. Sure, there were some rough patches here and there, but I take it as proof that I have grown since then. The words I've pulled out of my bone marrow at the time to even exist could be easily replaced with better fits now. I see ways how the sentence rhythm could be improved with a few easy changes, but the enjoyment, it was pure joy reading, and I'm so glad I have written it. So glad I could read it again. Perplexed, I don't write every weird fic that crosses my mind, because these things count, guys. They really do.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that's the case.
Check out the video on Jam Fighters to see why.
Yeah, no, I mean Jam Fighters, it has like a lot of it was just me like as a kid throwing stuff at the wall without any kind of like standard to specifically aspire to. It was pure creativity. But I was going to sort of make a broader point outside of obviously, I am blessed enough to be in touch with like a lot of my formative work, and so is the audience, and they can kind of intuit that journey. But I do think that there's a lot of people out there, a lot of writers who, once they reached the point of establishing any kind of standard, they started to despise writing. They started to dislike the process of it because it was no longer just makeup shotgun of like throwing everything they love at the wall.
And I know from conversations we've had off mic that we've both been there. We've been that person.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like, I think that it's a growing pain that every artist is going to go through, no matter what your medium. When you start to just like really want things to be good, then it becomes less about you in a sense, and it becomes about catering to the audience. And I'm sorry, at a certain point, you aren't writing for just yourself, not if you want to get published, but you can still be fun and indulgent because you can aim for
The kind of people with the same indulgences as you.
exactly, exactly. That doesn't mean it's all indulgence all the time or it's all dispassionate, like, look for the audience and cater to them all the time, but it's a combination of both. And the more you do of it, the more you can strike that balance.
Yeah, completely agreed. Yeah, I think that's all there is to say on that. I completely agree with that. I think it is important to come to terms with your old work because, yeah, I talk a lot about like my old creepypastas, projects like, say, Conjuria, which I'm very open about the fact that I think, from a writing perspective, is extremely flawed. However, I learned a shitload from my mistakes on that because at the end of the day, like, I think everyone is obsessed with this really stupid myth of like the person who like comes out of the womb and just produces back to back bangers from like nothing. And it's like, no, I think we all need to own our fuck ups because I don't know if I've ever brought this like theory up on this channel before, but it's something called the pile of garbage theory. Every single creative artist, writer, musician, animator, whatever, you need to at some point in your career, early on, make a pile of garbage. It's your choice as to whether you sit on top of it or get crushed under it.
Yeah, no, I would absolutely agree with that. In light of all of this, it is rather unfortunate. I don't know if I've shared this before, but like all of my Naruto fanfiction writing, which I've talked about before, it literally doesn't exist anywhere at all on the internet because the forum I wrote for canned its fanfiction section when I was like 19, and I didn't realize how important that was going to be. So now all of that is gone, and all I have is like the vague memories of what I wrote back then. It's kind of frustrating because like the fact that I'll never get it back, that's rough. And if anyone could take away anything from that sad story, it's save your stuff and don't throw anything out. Always have a way back to it, because if you're going to be doing this for a long time, you're going to want to remember where you came from. Don't make my mistake. Be in touch with your early cringy roots.
Which, by the way, is a reminder as well that if you are working right now, save it! Save it! Don't lose your fucking spaghetti!
Don't drop your spaghetti!
Yeah, I was going to say, just to add on to that before we move on to the next one, I've had those catastrophic events to me happen twice in the relatively recent history. I did a lot of writing on an app I used to have on my tablet, but when the OS updated, that app was no longer supported, and I lost conservatively tens of thousands of words. And a similar thing happened. I lost so much shit because my old laptop just got bricked at I think sort of the end of 2019, and that was fucking devastating. So yeah, save it all, my friends. Save it all. All right, you ready for the next one? Daily fantasy ideas. Oh my! I think these were the psionic mind prison people.
Oh, the psionic mind prison people, of course. Again, very funny to just apply that framework to anything, to every single story, but it is a cool concept
It is.
on its own, in the right
They
story.
say, I think maybe you should have some characters who have been repeatedly beckoned into doing fantastical quests by the voices of mysterious and powerful figures, then in parentheses, wizards, deities, spirits, a dragon maybe. And I think after having had to do this sort of thing several times over, the character or characters experienced to this are getting quite annoyed and tired at having to do it. So now, whenever they are beckoned, they either put it off for as long as they can, or they speed run through the whole thing so they can go back to their normal life. Very on brand for just weirdly specific advice.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it seems like daily fantasy ideas is just a different fantasy genre quirk each day, like to just tweak the basics of the genre. Um,
Something like
in
this
terms of
functions
this
pretty well as story seeds, honestly.
Yeah, and in terms of this specific advice, I like the idea that someone's not necessarily aware of the genre they're in, but they treat it as if it's a recurring thing in their lives, and they handle it the same way we handle our obligations. Because in this case, the whole being beckoned to adventure, if it happens to you like more than once, it's like being beckoned to stay late on a shift and clean up the rest of the shop. You know, it becomes a thing where people will react to that in different ways, and it says a lot about the character the way they handle it.
Yeah, I completely agree. So, yeah, if that sparks anything within you, get writing. Thank you, Daily Fantasy Ideas. Moving on to tip 5, writing coffee. A lot of coffee stuff on here. Writers have a nasty habit of fetishizing caffeine addiction, I think.
Listen, take it from someone whose last like non YouTube job was out in a coffee shop. I had way too much caffeine most of the time, and I would come home and get palpitations and my hands would still be shaking because I would just have it too close to the end of my shift.
Yeah, it's not good for
not
you.
good.
It's not good for you.
No.
Moving on from coffee, this is actually a quote from John Steinbeck that has been quoted here. So he says, the writer must believe that what he is doing is the most important thing in the world, and he must hold on to this illusion even when he knows it is not true. I mean, for a start, I just want to say, we're not going to attempt to fucking argue against the writing credentials of John East of Eden of Mice and Men Steinbeck. Like, creator of many of what are considered, like, the prototypical great American novels. But I think there's some interesting, like, wiggle room on this idea. Like, we said the complete opposite earlier. However, I think what he probably means here is just the sense that, like, you have to have deep convictions in your creative work.
Yeah, cuz like the thing is like it is Steinbeck, and if this like approach and this philosophy worked for him and produced the results it did, then obviously who are we to say,
Yeah.
"Ah, John, you should have done it different." Cuz I like a lot of
If
those
if
books.
only if only John Steinbeck had listened to the Less is More guys decades after his death, maybe things would have been differently. Maybe little Mr. Steinbeck would have had some success.
Yeah, see, we were born in the wrong decade. If we were writing influencers back in John Steinbeck's time, things would have been a little different. I'm just saying.
Yeah, exactly. Working on YouTube back in the the Dust Bowl era. I want to specify that was a joke. We don't actually think we're better writers than John fucking Steinbeck. Are you insane?
I would be stunned by. Listen,
There are no limits to the bad faith of the people on this platform, Mr. Zagarella. We know this.
I'm going to verbally say sarcasm was implied by those statements.
Sarcasm. Anyway, sorry, you were saying?
Well, I'm also gonna say like this. I think the best like steelman of this advice, because I think more important than anything in the world, that's always going to be subjective and weird. I do think when you are writing, when you're on a project, of course you have to believe this is priority number one. If you want to do this as a job, if you want to complete this project, if it really matters to you, this is the thing you're going to fulfill. Don't let other like obligations get in your way, whether those be leisure, whether those be whether those be a family, whether those be a job that's not this job.
You're slowly turning into like a Momoe version of Jack Torrance from The Shining.
No, I think what Steinbeck is trying to say is, if you want to do a novel, that is your most important thing at that time. Because if you don't do it, you won't be a novelist. It does seem like the kind of thing that someone who is very experienced at a craft can say once they're already a big cheese, though.
Yeah, the bigger cheese. I gotta say, I'm still just thinking about Momoe Jack Torrance, and I'm just thinking of the sentence, "All work and mo play makes Jack a dull boy."
All work and mo play makes Waishni Dakimakuras.
God, this fucking cursed. All right. Thank you, John Steinbeck.
Thanks, John. You really knocked it out. This John Steinbeck guy is going to blow up now that he's been on a Two Professional Writers video. I hope we'll get a comment from him.
Yeah, he's really going to get the Dar Gentleman bump. Hey, Mr. Steinbeck, if ever you want to collab, please get in touch.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, tip 6 from Alvalera. I've just seen the first sentence of this, and I'm fascinated as to where this is going. Pro writing tip. If your story doesn't need a number, don't put a fucking number in it. So there is more, but how are you feeling based on that?
Oh my god, okay. D&D time again. So I do this thing in my Pathfinder games where basically the system right out of the box, it'll tell you use gold coins, silver coins, platinum coins for everything, do exact numbers, everything has prices. For me, I don't do that. I give out rewards and allow the characters to purchase or buy things based on their relative gear or rollout that they do at the beginning of the mission. Like I'll say, you have this much resource for this much resource for this. Once you use that, it's gone. I don't have them keep track of exact numbers of gold pieces because the story is not how much money's in each of these people's wallets, it's what they're doing and the choices they're making.
And I imagine as a result, it's a much more fun time for the players than if you were like pulling a fucking abacus out to like, okay, let's have a look at this.
Now listen, some people at their tables, they like to do it the other way. They like to track like all the gold. They like to track like how many arrows are in the quiver of the archer, and that's fine if that's their version of fun. But for me and my table, a lot of it is more focused on like the role-playing aspects themselves, and the money management kind of would get in the way of that for our version of fun.
Fair enough. All right, well, let's see what Avalera says. Nothing, I mean nothing, activates reader pedantry like a number. I have seen it 1,000 times in writing workshops. People just can't resist nitpicking a number. For example, this sci-fi story takes place 200 years in the future, and they have a faster-than-light travel because it's plot convenient. Will immediately drag every armchair scientist out of the woodwork to say why there's no way that technology would exist in only 200 years. Dates, ages, math, spans of time. I don't know what it is, but the second a specific number shows up, your reader is thinking, and they're thinking critically, but it's about whether that information is correct. They are now doing the math and have gone off drawing conclusions and getting distracted from your story, or worse, pulling it down entirely because, that sword could not have existed in that medieval year, or this character couldn't be this old because that means they're an infant when this other story event happened that they're supposed to know about, or these two events now overlap in the timeline, or etc., etc., etc. Unless you are 1000% certain that a specific number is adding to your narrative, and you know rock solid backwards and forwards that the information attached to that number is correct and consistent throughout the entire story, do yourself a favor and don't bring that evil down upon your head. There's a story here.
I agree completely with this. Like, and the thing is, there are going to be people who vehemently disagree with this, and fair enough, but I think they're getting lost in the weeds because what matters is the story. I'll give an example of here's a way that a number can be well utilized within a piece of media itself, and then I'll describe how it also led to some complications.
Go on.
I'm going to be even more basic, and I'm going to mention Avatar: The Last Airbender a second time.
Again, my god. I'm going to stage a fucking intervention.
So, In that show, Aang is in the iceberg for 100 years. There was 100 years of war, and he breaks out. Basically, we have two time periods. We'll get like stuff that happened in the intervening years or like flashbacks to things, but they never tell us what exact year each of these things happened. There's just a gap of 100 years between what's going on now and what's going on then, and we don't need to know every date in between. And I think that's cool. It delineates the backstory and the current story into two separate time periods.
Yeah.
And a certain PlayStation 2 RPG game, kind of underrated, Dark Chronicle in Europe, Dark Cloud 2 in the US, does a similar thing with having present story where you kind of affect events in the future 100 years from now, essentially making two different settings, one of which affects the other in a linear way. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And I think another great example of like doing what is being suggested by Valera here is Meg and I were recently talking about the movie The Time Bandits because I've written like a weird kind of semi-fantastical thing recently, and how to avoid this whole thing of like a fantasy kind of context meshing too much with any specific era in history, they just refer to these times as the time of legends. And that's a very good way to do it.
That's so good. That's so solid. Always go with that when you can. Because the only reason. No, you know what? I can't even think of a reason off the top of my head with my sensibilities to defend mapping out every single year.
We'll declare our biases here. That's just ultimately not the kind of storytelling that Gus and I are into. And like, if you have other tastes, that's completely fine. Like, live your bliss as long as you actually write the thing. But yeah, I think honestly, we're just always gonna be more about like character and like plot structure and things like that, rather than like the kind of wiki esque like lore mapping fascination.
This is also speaking as someone who like tried to write multiple timelines for different fantasy settings, because I would look at the splat books for D&D 3.5, Eberron and Forgotten Realms, and those would have like year by year all these different dates for like all this different stuff, which is fine to do, I think, if you've got many authors and a big publishing company for a tabletop game to collaborate with. But if it's just you, don't do that. I tried to sketch out so many timelines, and you know how much of that stuff actually got used in any of the games I run? Almost none of it. People would ask, like, oh, what's the deal with this? Oh, that's that. They would never ask what date and time this took place, how long this kingdom was around, any of that stuff. Whatever you need to know to answer the questions of your story or of your audience, put that in. But dates and times, they're a road to just iceberging your story out of control into a massive thing that serves no actual utility.
Yeah, you will finally like understand how like Lovecraft characters can like go too deep and descend into madness when you do that shit. You know, when you're doing what we call soil map storytelling, you're just so in the weeds that you're like fighting a fucking ladybug thinking it's a dragon.
Yeah, exactly. Now, Henry, before we move on to the next one, do you want me to, because I was implying it a little bit earlier, do you want to hear a really silly, kind of petty observation about the timeline of the Avatar world?
Please. And I'm going to declare a little something about myself that will maybe get people spicy down in the comments.
Ooh.
I never finished Avatar because I watched. No, it's not like a personal like. It's not that I have anything against it. Like I acknowledge from what I've heard that it seems like a real good show, but like I saw a bunch of episodes like as a kid when it was first airing, but like I'm gonna be honest, like I don't watch a lot of children's media. I tend to watch grown-up things. Which,
Sacrilege on YouTube.
yes, I know, right?
Sacrilege.
We should all be
Burn
watching
the
stuff.
heretic.
We should all be watching stuff at the Y7 to 12 market.
Yes.
Well into our 20s, 30s, 40s, and beyond.
And we need to react to them and make videos exclusively about them.
Yeah, like it's one thing if it's like Centaur World where it's just like not that much of an episode commitment, but like generally with a few notable exceptions, I mostly consume are intended for grown-ups. But anyway, sorry, please continue after I've massively condescended to you.
No, here's the thing. I watched it as a kid and I only learned this information like later, like, in the wiki phases. Also, kind of excited for an Avatar tabletop game that made its Kickstarter funding and it's coming out next month, but that's beside the point. Eventually, the creators of the show did have to create an official timeline for supplemental materials and like marketing stuff, like side books, not the actual show itself.
Mm.
And they had to give dates and times and like spans for each of these different characters. And as a result of maybe not fully working through how much certain characters did and how little certain other ones didn't, one of the avatars, Kyoshi, lived to the ripe old age of 230, and the avatar before her only lived to be 35.
I mean, he drank, he smoked, he did the cocaine. Like, of course, he was on the road to nowhere, that guy.
I mean, knowing what I do about Avatar Kuruk, that's not inaccurate. I mean, he did end up chasing after a face-stealing spirit because it took the face of his wife, and maybe that's why he died at a young, early age. It's just very funny to be juxtaposed with 230 years.
See, Gus, I actually think, to go back to a point earlier in the video, I think he was actually killed by his caffeine addiction. I mean, look at his name, Avatar Keurig. Clearly a coffee nut.
Avatar Keurig. Oh my god. Oh no. Why have you done this? That's not even how it's spelled, but it's just how I'm gonna see it from now on. Avatar Keurig.
Please, if you've made it this far in, work Avatar Keurig into your comments somehow.
That's why his wife got her face stolen by Ko the Face Stealer, because he was like, Ko, if you even move, he'll take your face, and she was like, I'm fine, I will show no emotion. But then her eye twitched because she had too much caffeine, and Ko stole her face.
Yeah, from her fucking husband, Avatar Keurig.
Ko, face stealer, coffee stealer, it all makes sense. If you drink coffee, he'll steal you.
It was all a metaphor.
Caffeine kills.
Avatar, the last bean blender.
Oh
it
my
was
god.
There all along.
Everything changed when the roasted beans kingdom attacked.
Because think about it. What do you need to do to make a perfect coffee? You got to get the beans freshly ground,
which come from the earth.
Earthbenders, freshly ground.
Mm-hmm.
Then,
you
roast them, the Fire Nation. Then you add in the water, and when you pick it up,
you froth the milk with what?
Air.
Air.
You froth the milk with air. Then you pick it up and you blow on it to cool it down before you drink. It was all about coffee all along. This is the theory. To master the Avatar state is to make the perfect cup of coffee. And you know how they do those little like foam art? You draw like the downwards arrow on it.
I'm blown away, dude. You've changed. You've irrevocably. You've damaged it. You've ruined my childhood. No, I love this. I support this, and this is all canon now. I don't think I'll ever reference Avatar on this channel again without bringing the coffee lore into it.
Hey, Gus.
Yeah.
Fire Lord, cup of Joe's eye.
Shut up.
Oh my god. Fire Lord roasts eye.
Okay, we need to move on.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
Second to last tip from Willow is Writing. Now I'm just thinking about what Gus and I were talking about before we recorded this. I need to stay strong.
We're giggling, man. We're gonna lose it. Oh boy.
Two fucking deranged writers. Anyway, so this next one is a list thing called How to Kick a Reader in the Gut. You tell them about the Avatar coffee theory.
Yeah, you really mess them up.
Anyway, so okay, we're composed.
Serious, professional writers.
How to kick a reader in the gut. And this is a series of subheadings, each one with like subpoints, so we'll take it subheading by subheading. Number one is disrupt the reader's sense of justice. And below it says, This generally means setting a character up to deserve one thing and then giving them the exact opposite. Kill a character off before they can achieve their goal. Let the bad guy get an extremely important win. Set up a coup against a tyrannical king. The coup fails miserably. Are you feeling about that so far?
I'm feeling like the Subvertio Expositio crowd's getting very antsy down there.
Subvertio Expositio, my favorite wizard.
Now that's my favorite type of coffee.
No! No! Alright. Next one. Don't always give characters closure. And then in the parenthesis, excluding the end of the book, obviously. And then, a beloved friend dies in battle and there's no time to mourn him. A random tryst between two main characters is not, and then in parenthesis, or cannot be, brought up again. A character suddenly loses their job or can otherwise no longer keep up their old routine. Yeah, these are all ways to kick a reader in the gut.
I mean, I think kicking a reader in the gut, it's framed so aggressively, but I honestly I sometimes think it's cool when a piece of media will portray a battlefield death as happening very quickly and the character's just moving on. It's not a drawn out they die in their arms. I sometimes like it when characters just buy it. Ditto for maybe a pair of characters hooking up or having a brief tryst that occurs but doesn't become a huge romantic subplot, and those characters may or may not even end up together at the end of the story. Far from kicking readers in the gut, I think that these are sometimes a breath of fresh air because they go against the sort of overwrought dramatic trappings of these things are so important that the world is going to stop and allow them to happen.
Yeah, it feels like oftentimes a good way to respect your readers is to give them something they haven't seen before. Again, I think that there can be a flaw when, I think as we've said in previous episodes, when the author becomes too antagonistic to the audience. But at the same time, look at movies like Star Wars, was it The Rise of Skywalker? Yeah, everybody loves a movie that just tries to give the fans everything they want.
Oh yeah, that pandered so hard. And it was like, look, you like Star Wars when they go take knives to planets and investigate. You like it when they go to many, many planets. You like it when the Palpatine, remember him? He's back.
Everyone's favorite.
Yeah. No, that's the most critically beloved Star Wars film of all time, and audiences loved it too.
It's
and
true.
at the end of the day,
brought us all together.
They always agree and they always love the same things. They know what's good all the time.
Yeah, that is fair. Alright, now more ways to kick a reader in the gut. Make it the main character's fault sometimes. And not in an imposter syndrome way. Make your main character do something bad, and make the blame they shoulder for it heavy and tangible. Main character must choose the lesser of two evils. Main character kills someone they believe to be a bad guy, only to later discover the bad guy was a different person altogether. I fully believe in having your main character make mistakes and letting them actually face the consequences for that.
Oh, absolutely. To bring back an ancient take from this show, it's important to not have your characters be complete they can if you want to do this, but your characters don't have to be complete reflections of your morality at all times.
Yeah, definitely not.
And to go against your morality or to have a more complex or morally gray character isn't creating a villain protagonist. It's just a protagonist.
If I had the morality of even some of my nicer characters, I'd be in jail.
And if all of my characters reflected my morality, they'd all agree with each other and they wouldn't get into such arguments and conflicts because they wouldn't be operating on different ethical frameworks.
Yeah, completely agreed. Alright, on to the next part. Rejection is a powerful tool. People generally want to be understood, and if they can make a character think they are known and then rip that away from them with rejection, then in parenthesis, romantic or platonic, people will empathize with it. Main character is finally accepting the thing they must do/become, and their love interest decides that's not the path they want to be on and breaks up with them. Main character makes a decision they believe is right. Everyone around them thinks they chose wrong. Main character finds kinship with someone, like them, at long last, but the person later discovers there is some inherent aspect of main character that they wholly reject. Then in parenthesis, perhaps it was the main character's fault their family member died, they have important religious differences, or they were the bad guy all along. On the flip side, make your main character keep going. Push them beyond what they are capable of, and then push them further. Make them want something so deeply they are willing to do literally anything to get it. Give them passion and drive and grit and more of that than they have fear. But what if my main character is quiet and meek? Even better. They want something so deeply that every single moment they push themselves towards it is a moment spent outside their comfort zone. What must that do to a person? Obviously, don't do all of these things, or the story can feel tedious or overly dramatic. And make sure that every decision you make is informed by your plot, first and foremost. Also, remember that the things that make us sad, angry, or otherwise emotional as readers are the same things that make us feel that way in our day to day lives. Creating an empathetic main character is the foundation for all of the above tips.
Oh, that last sentence does so much heavy lifting for
Yeah.
this. Like, I agree with everything throughout this up to a point, but I think what this is all really getting at, and they state it themselves, is that this is about introducing internal conflict and nuanced character writing across the board. It's one thing to establish a world where I've got my good guy and I've got my bad guy, and the good guy represents things that I believe are moral, and the bad guy represents things that I believe are immoral or weak, and then pitting them against each other. This approach is so much better because it shows that no matter what your story is about, the absolute good and absolute evil are not fully embodied by anyone. People can be flawed. You could have a story about that. You can have an exception to anything. That's not a gotcha. That's just a thing that you can do. But in general, I think nuanced characters who have multifacets and war with themselves sometimes and have conflict within themselves and with others is very important.
Yeah, no, honestly, that's just true. It's just extremely, extremely true.
I'd be surprised to read a story that I thought was exceptional that didn't do at least one of these things in it at some point.
And also, like with the subject of these like kind of protagonists that aren't just these moral paragons, going all the way back to our video essay on Angel Dust, I think it is a pretty good rule to have that protagonists ask questions and antagonists make arguments, because at the end of the day, you ideally want your character to be able to go somewhere, and to go somewhere they can't be completely right or have all the answers to begin with, because if that's the case, they won't learn anything about themselves and they won't develop. And again, because we fucking have to do this as much as I'm loath to, yes, you can have a completely flat character arc. I'm just saying, I'll be less likely to be interested in what you're making if you do.
Hey Henry, not to bring numbers back into it, but aren't power levels really cool?
I think their coolness is over 9,000, Gus.
Oh yeah, it's 2009 again, you little sluts.
Yeah. Welcome to our world. I can't believe we just called the fucking audience sluts. What are we doing?
Hey,
What would
I
Avatar
don't know.
Keurig think of this?
Oh God, he'd probably agree because he was a very
Caffeinated
misguided
man.
Some of my favorite protagonists from like movies are wonderfully flawed and have so much to learn. Gloria, who is Anne Hathaway's character in Colossal, begins that movie needing to like understand so much, whereas Jason Sudeikis' character Oscar thinks he knows the entire score. And they both go through character arcs. Gloria's a positive one, Oscar's a negative one. And when they meet in the middle, you almost feel like, because they're at the same point in the arc, oh, they're going to reconcile and that's going to be the plot. But then it becomes clear that Gloria is rising to become a hero and Oscar is falling to become a villain. And it's fascinating, and it's why it's one of my favorite movies of all time. Also, I didn't want to say this here because it's, for the non-Patreon people, they may not know the character, but Hutch Mansell from Nobody. Very good, very interesting protagonist with a lot of like flaws, who is vulnerable, who can be hurt, but also just clearly the perfect hero for the story they're telling.
This is also a great opportunity to say, if you have $1 a month that's burning a hole in your pocket, please go donate to the Dog Gentleman Patreon, because you'll both support the channel and all of us, and gain access to 2 new exclusive podcasts featuring Gus, me, Meg, and other people every single month. There's already 9 on there. You're getting like over 10 hours of entertainment for your first $1, in addition to everything that comes after. and we discuss, as Gus just alluded to, the fantastic and grievously slept on 2021 movie Nobody. If you do go and become a patron, we will be forever grateful.
Yeah, exactly. And if you give us $1 a month on Patreon, we'll be able to buy as much caffeine as we need to
Yes.
stay writing.
Yes!
We need it! Bring on that last tip, man! Bring it on!
Yes! Alright. X Right Z says, keep a coulda, shoulda, woulda list while writing your first draft of the ideas you have for edits and changes in your second draft. As they say, a short pencil is better than a long memory. I keep a document titled Ideas to Remember for Every Work in Progress. I use it for 4 major things. Things I need to include in scenes I haven't written yet, details like what month the story takes place in, or minor place names that I need to keep track of, action needed items for things I have to fix in scenes I've already written, second draft considerations for possible changes to the story I need to rethink before starting the second draft. It always ends up being a pretty messy document, but it has always helped me manage my drafting process. I always organize and tag the ideas by what chapter they are for to help me navigate the process a little better. Yes, I fully fucking agree with this.
Yeah, absolutely. Cause like the thing is, I think my worst habit as a writer is will edit on the fly and change a first draft
Yeah,
into a second
bad.
draft while it's happening.
Bad Gus, spray bottle.
Bad. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't be like me. It may temporarily make scenes stronger than they would have been on the first pass, but you're also wasting a lot more time, and that's time you can't get back.
Yeah.
So what I will say is keep all these ideas in the sideline, keep them in the periphery, and come back to them when you're in that second draft because it's just worth it to keep notes of all that stuff. An example of me doing this in a better way is the amount I wrote down for my ongoing Pathfinder campaign. I kept so many details in so many notes throughout it that when I was thinking like, okay, where is the story going now? What elements are coming back in? I would reintegrate all these ideas that didn't fully get elaborated on in the notes so that it would all sort of come to a head with like these various elements that had been set up in bits and pieces before and could now intermingle with each other because they had the benefit of perspective.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great points there. And I am also an obsessive, like, physical notebook note taker. I always carry around just this little notebook I have, and I'm writing down ideas in it. Because, yeah, I think writing this stuff down and having places to look at it. Also, a software that I use for both my work writing and just my pleasure writing is Trello. It is excellent for organizing things, whether you have a group project or it's just yourself. I'd really recommend it. This is not sponsored. I just find their software really useful.
I'd also like to recommend Milanote. You can do anything from like story ideas to story structure to like, just random post-it notes that you want to do. But it's great. You can get more space by having your friends sign up for it. And it's all free and also not sponsored. I just want to plug a thing that's very useful.
And I'd also like to tell you about Raid Shadow Legends, the hottest MOBA. Could you fucking imagine? God.
The second you see a Raid Shadow Legends ad on this channel,
leave. We've failed you.
No, I've been killed and deep faked. That's how you know that'll happen.
Gus has been turned into an NFT.
Yeah, exactly. I've been zapped by the fat cat and turned into an FT. Yeah.
God damn it. So yeah, that is our second wave of Tumblr writing advice to hopefully give some balm to the aching souls of the poor Tumblr user base whose website just keeps fucking with them.
Oh man, it's bizarre.
And these are great people. Like Tumblr has consistently, on the whole, given us some fantastic writing advice. And like a lot of people will, because they're pedants, will say, oh, well, actually, there's some bad people on Tumblr too. And it's like, yeah, arseflash news hole. There are bad people fucking everywhere. But I prefer to judge best against best rather than worst against worst.
Also, Henry, I think it's so funny that like the record here speaks for itself. The person we had the most contention with in terms of their tip was John fucking Steinbeck.
One of the greatest novelists of all time.
Yeah, exactly. So, the standards on Tumblr are very high. I'd say these are great people. They're also all better writers than John Steinbeck, that hack who's never produced anything great in his entire long storied career. I can't keep a straight face by saying that.
My brain
I love
just-
John Steinbeck.
Yeah, John Steinbeck's great. My brain just went of mice and men, more like of arse and tits, and I thought, oh no, I made it even more awesome.
The moon is down. More like, soon this clown will be out of town.
East of Eden, more like east of my coffee addiction.
Grapes of Wrath. More like, he's an ass.
Got him! Oh, welcome to
Hey!
God Gentleman Channel. You're not ready. It's hell.
I'm sorry, John. I'm so sorry.